Hi, welcome back to Chester's Book Nook. This is just like a little cozy chat of something I've been thinking about lately, and I have seen other people talk about this because I think it's just a common thing in reading spaces that a lot of us set ourselves goals of what we want to achieve, and we love reading. We've got like these huge TBR lists which we really want to get through, and we think there's so many fantastic books out there that we just want to get the chance to read. So we set ourselves these goals of getting through X amount of books a year. But then I think for some of us, that can really kill the joy of reading. On the one hand, maybe it's helpful, to have some target, but I know I personally ended up moving mine down quite a bit because I used to set it at like 100. And then it gets to the point where if you're not at that goal near the end of the year, you start thinking, like, you start to actually feel pressured about something that's a hobby that you're supposed to be enjoying, and you might be tempted to read the books more quickly or to pick shorter books to avoid long books that you want to read. So that just doesn't make any sense. So personally, I moved mine down to 50, which is still a lot, but it's a loose goal. And if I catch myself at any point thinking, I can't read that book because it's too long and I'm not going to hit my goal, I think, stop. What are you doing this for then? And it's funny because I don't do it with other hobbies. Like, I don't set myself a target to play my flute for a certain amount of time. I don't set myself a target of how many pages of my colouring book I must colour in, or how many plants I must grow in my garden. I do it with my work. So with my work, I'll think, okay, I have this many pages to write. So I'll set myself targets there. But reading is something that brings me joy and meaning into my life. So I don't want it to become like a target driven thing. I do think there's some benefits to setting a goal, and that is why I still have one. I think it helps with consistency, and for those of us that struggle with consistency, like I do with my little squirrel brain, and I think it can help me, and it reminds me that it's something that I want to do and that I want to make time for. I want to make time for this hobby. And I think it can bring a real sense of achievement, and it gives that like little dopamine rush. I mean, you get that anyway when you complete the book, but sort of being able to see like, oh, that's the 10th book I've read this year, or whatever it is. But then there's also just a lot of downsides. And I think one of these is that we live in a world that praises productivity above all else. And that just isn't the way it should be. And it definitely shouldn't be that way in our hobbies and the things that bring joy into our lives. We might even begin comparing ourselves to other readers and thinking, well, how do they read so much? Why aren't I reading that much? Or it could be a variety of things. And there's never any joy in comparison. And I feel like we all know that. We all know the saying that comparison is the thief of joy. And it really is. And when we set these goals and we see other people setting them, we kind of can't help but seeing like what they've set for themselves and how many books they're reading a month. And really, it's not relevant, because what actually matters is whether we're reading things that we enjoy and things that are adding value to our life. And it makes me think back to when I was a kid, because I've always been an avid reader and I just devoured books. But I couldn't tell you how many I read. If I asked 10-year-old me or 12-year-old me or 16-year-old me how many books I was reading, I would have absolutely no idea. And I'm old enough that I didn't have a phone when I was younger. I think I did have a flip phone by the time I was about 15, and maybe one of those old Nokia 3310s that you could just play Snake on when I was 14. I didn't get a smartphone until I was in university. So I wasn't comparing myself on social media. It was a simpler time. Yeah, I didn't have a little device in my pocket where I could just keep track of stuff all the time. But what I did have on me was a book, so I would read a lot. I would read all sorts of things, and yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea of how many of what genres I was reading, and it is nice to be able to, I love some good statistics, right? So it's nice to be able to keep track of those things. But sometimes I miss that just childlike joy of just devouring like books and sitting, curled up on your bed and reading and not feeling any need to track them, not feeling like you have any sort of list to get through. Yeah, I feel like we need to go back to that a little bit. I will say for me, I don't feel any pressure actually having like a long TBR. In fact, I think I would be at a complete loss if I didn't have a long TBR because it makes me feel really excited seeing how many like great books that I have that I'm going to get to one day. It is more just the pressure of if you're thinking, I have to read this many by this date. That's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm not trying to avoid having a super long TBR. I'm always adding stuff to my TBR and that won't change. So what do I think that we should do about this? I mean, I don't know what you should do about it because it's obviously this is really personal. Like maybe reading goals work great for you, and maybe they don't make you feel any pressure. And if not, then that's great. And like I say, I find them helpful to an extent. But what I'm doing personally is really trying to focus on the quantity over, sorry, focus on the quantity. Wow, was that a Freudian slip? I'm trying to focus on the quality over quantity. So one of the things I did recently was I put together a big list of all of my absolute favourite books, and then I put another list of all the books that I did not like. And I went through them and I looked at the themes, all the similarities between them, and tried to work out what I love in a book, what makes me DNF a book, what sort of themes that I can't stand being in a book. And that way, I think I'm less likely to sort of waste my time on books that I'm not enjoying. And another part of that is, of course, learning to DNF books. And I'm trying to pick out books that I think I will enjoy. I'm still giving, books outside of what I think I'd like a bit of a chance, but mostly I'm trying to stick to things that I feel that I will, actually enjoy. And then another thing I'm doing is to make sure that I'm actually taking the time to read them slowly rather than feeling any sort of rush to get through it or complete that book by a certain point of time. I'm naturally quite a fast reader anyway, but I'm still trying to be really intentional with the way I'm reading and taking my time with it. I've obviously now that I've started this channel, I don't want to add any pressure to myself or make it feel like, oh, well, I need to read this much now and I need to do this because otherwise I won't have content. I don't want to do that because I think the reality is we're all looking for that more intentional life. We're all looking to actually slow down a bit. We recognize that this world is very fast paced and it prizes those for their productivity when really the one thing we're all looking for is contentment and to enjoy our hobbies. One thing I do think is really valuable rather than just counting the books is actually spending some time afterwards to reflect on them. I like to keep a journal where I write down my thoughts on the books and just anything that comes up while I'm actually reading them. I mean, obviously it's helpful because then I can share it with you, but I was doing this long before. I've been doing this for years, and it makes you actually be able to take in what you read. It makes you slow down. And also it helps you to choose books that you'll actually enjoy in the future because you can look back and you can think, oh, well, actually, I've just read a series of books I didn't like, and these are some common reasons that I didn't like them. So then at least you're not, wasting your time reading the wrong things for you. I mean, it's going to happen sometimes, we all pick up books that we think is going to be brilliant and then it ends up being disappointing. That's always going to happen. Yeah, to sum up, I would say that I don't think reading goals are bad and I think they can be helpful to an extent, but I don't think they should, boss us around. I don't think they should I don't think we should feel any sort of guilt or shame or that we should compare ourselves to other people into how much they're reading. And I do think it's really helpful to reflect on what you're reading and to take time to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And just to, remember to read more slowly and to actually enjoy the hobby that you love so much, rather than just thinking, what's the next book I'm going on to? Enjoying the book that you're actually reading. Love the one you're with, that type of thing. Otherwise, we're always just thinking, on to the next one. I want to read this next. And just taking the time to appreciate the book that we're actually on. But I'd love to know, do you set yourself reading goals? And if you do you set like quite a small manageable one? Do you say, well, I'm going to read five books a year and I'll be happy at that? Or are you someone who likes to set really ambitious ones? Are you one of those 200 books a year people? Or perhaps you do something else, like rather than track the amount of books you read, you track how many books you've read that you actually enjoyed. I feel like that could be kind of a fun way of tracking, like how how many books have I read that I'm actually glad I read. Now I've thought of that, I feel like I might start jotting that down. I might start making a list that's sort of like, I read it, but should I have done? But yeah, please share if you do this or if you've abandoned your reading goals, and if you ever feel any pressure or if you used to feel some pressure of them. I can't wait to hear from you in the comments. Okay, see you soon. Bye.